So welcome everybody. I'm Melissa Moore and I'm the steward of Karuna training. And Karuna offers a 260 plus hour certificate in contemplative psychology, but we don't train therapists. We train anyone who's interested in contemplative psychology as a path of compassion, and Karuna means compassion in Sanskrit. So I'm Melissa Moore, she, her, and I'm sitting on the land of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and um, Ute Indians, and just taking a moment to acknowledge the land that we have taken and rouse our compassion for lands that aren't ours, that we take for granted every day. A little bit about Karuna Lives. We do offer an hour of time where you can come and meet some of the faculty. And tonight's special because I invited a dear friend and also colleague, Jan Chapin. Janneli has been, we've been friends since we were both students at Naropa. We were both part of the same spiritual path and students of Chugye and Trungpa together at Naropa. And we were at Naropa University many years ago. And both, what's interesting about having Janneli on tonight is that she probably is one of the most experienced Maitri teachers I know of. She's just been offering Maitri in the Masters in Contemplative Psychology program for a very long time. I don't know, you'll have to say how long, Janneli, you've been doing that. And so I've invited her tonight to offer a meditation and then on Maitri and self-love, just to center us, to get us started so you can feel a little bit about what we're about. And then she and I are going to have a conversation. So welcome, Janneli. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Melissa, for inviting me. Maybe just to introduce myself a wee bit, I identify as a white cisgendered female, pansexual, and also I'm a woman with a hearing loss disability. So those things are important for me to say because I am acknowledging that I'm looking through the world from this particular lens. And just wanted you to know that as I go along. And my pronouns are here, she, her, hers. And I think also around land acknowledgement, I just want to acknowledge, especially in Boulder County, a piece of land, an area that I've been actually practicing and saying prayers for, which is an area that is just a few miles east and north of my home. And it's a place where in 1864, there was a fort called Fort Chambers that was built on this land. And also the Company D, which was a branch of the US Army, trained there for what resulted then, after this training, into an attack on mostly women, children, and elders on the Big Sandy Creek in southeast Colorado. So making a direct link between this history, land, and people of Boulder at that time and the Sand Creek Massacre. So I go to this land and I practice there and say prayers, and just feeling in this moment like I'd like to take just a few moments with you all to hold that in our hearts. I'm also aware that you all are standing probably on different native lands, and so you could also include that in these moments. So thank you. I just have been feeling into the deception and the misinformation back then around what was really occurring at that time, which felt by the Arapaho and the Cheyenne people as a huge betrayal that has really changed them forever. And as we speak, there's a movement in the city of Boulder with the Cheyenne people and the Arapaho, North and South Arapaho people. There's a project called Healing the Land, Healing the People. And this is something that if you're from this area, you can plug into and learn more about. So with that in mind, maybe we could, would you like a guided meditation, a Maitri meditation, Melissa?
Yes, that would be wonderful. Please do so.
Okay, great. So this is more of an investigative practice using Maitri. So if you would begin, you can have your eyes open or closed and just feel your posture, which is a sense of being upright and gentle, yet awake. And our breath hopefully is available. If at any time this guided Maitri meditation doesn't work for you, please just let it kind of move over you. So you have choice here. But if you're so willing, choose a person who has been very kind to you in your life. And you have no doubt about this person's kindness. So imagining this person in front of you, feeling them here, not just even imagining, but actually some sense of feeling that this person in your life has had your back in many ways. Perhaps you've gone to them when you felt hurt or bewildered or in need of care. So conjure this person up beside you, sitting back to back with, in front of you, wherever that person is with you. And then if you would, recall an explicit occasion when this person was kind to you. Observe in these moments how you react to that occasion. Are you able to let that kindness in? So first we're going to notice how we might try to keep that kindness out. Do you take the position that this person didn't really mean this kindness towards you? Or you suspect that this person had their own special motives toward you? How might you shut down this kindness towards you? Is there a way that you quickly acknowledge the kindness, but then you move on, not really letting it touch you or come into you? Do you only let in one part of the kindness and shut out the rest? Do you feel surprised or shocked by this person's kindness? And so now the next step in this process is to really acknowledge this kindness, that it's a gift. So again, recalling this specific occasion when this same person was kind to you. Kindness means that this person gave freely to you. They chose to give to you. So now we're going to investigate with our heart what arises as you acknowledge this kindness. How did it help you at the time? How did you feel when that person was kind to you? So as you continue, see what kindness was and what it was not. If you come to any realization that what you thought was kindness was not freely given, just be with that, be with that pain. Also bringing your attention to how this pain can cause you to shut down. Bit by bit, open to this experience, whatever it is arising for you in these moments. Each instance of kindness that we experience can be a recognition of the validity of our own being by the other person. Loving kindness is radiant warmth and openness. It's an unattached appreciation with no sense of obligation. And it arises naturally when our attention penetrates layers of conditioning that shuts us down from other people. So in the next few moments, you can come back to being in this space, Maitri space, the space of warmth and radiance, the space of goodness, the space of unconditional friendliness, and the space of love. Okay, that's,
Wonderful. Thank you, Janneli.
you're welcome.
That was insightful because I know even in this late stage of life, and as long as I've been doing Maitri space awareness, that so much of my healing, which is our topic tonight, has been to open to the kindness that I receive.
Mm.
And that's so really, because of my history and whatever I bring is just my particular path, but I think it's not unfamiliar for a lot of people. So it was an interesting visualization. Thank you.
Mhm.
So tonight we're going to talk about healing and Maitri space awareness. And Maitri space awareness is a particular practice that was gifted to Westerners by Chogyam Trungpa, specifically to explore psychology and to train in the therapeutic arts, you could say. And he introduced the mandala and basically gave meditation instruction. And then I would say for the last, how long ago was that? How long has we been working with Maitri Space Aware? I would say we've spent the last 45 years trying to figure out what the hell this is because it's so esoteric and at the same time, it's simply like all meditation practice about relaxing in the present moment and opening, but it's uses a particular tantric method of intensification where we draw on the five Buddha family mandala, which is a tantric mandala, which I believe is endowed with lots of invisible force and energy because so many people have practiced on that mandala for centuries and centuries. So talk about an evidence-based practice. I mean, it's something that sticks around. And basically, we draw on those five familial qualities of our experience in life. And we say mandala, which is a Sanskrit word, which means circle and fringe. It really presents a way of viewing the many elements of the world as being interdependent and in continual relationship with each other, all the aspects of the world. And this is a tool to intensify one's own energy and conditioning in such a way that you can't ignore certain aspects of ourselves. that's that's what I would say happens. And the joke of the Maitri program often is that it's a bloat and pop method where we just get so much intensity going and suddenly we see our mind, and it's sort of astounding when you see yourself in your habitual tendencies. You can either laugh or you can intensify further and act out more, right? There's always this choice point. But I remember being a young student, don't you, and lying in these postures and saying, what are we doing? And then going out and acting like a crazy person. And the people saying, oh, aren't you doing the Padma family? Or aren't you doing the karma? I could not make that correlation for many years. So we're talking tonight, like, what is healing about this? What are we talking about when we talk about what is healing? Because it's very extreme practice. Maybe hopefully some of you on the call have done it, and we'll give you some time to ask some questions directly. But Janneli, what would you say about this practice and healing work?
Right. Well, let's see. Lately, I've been thinking about how Maitri space awareness invites us to confront historical trauma and the conditioned aspects of our psyche that might feel inadequate or alienated or unlovable. And this is coming for me because I've been having a lot of contact and conversation with Eduardo Duran, who's a Apache, Tiwa, and Lakota native person, and we've been having lots of interesting dialogue about healing and healing with energy and space and color and sound. So, this practice of Maitri is really rooted in the traditions of Buddhism, using physical postures within this colored environment, which evokes a kind of vibrational energy, which is fostering the state of mind of both an awakened and authentic aspects. And like you said, Melissa, it can also accentuate our constrictions or our neuroses, if you will, from the psychological language. I don't like to use that word much, but the ways that we become constricted. And I think that if we're really doing the practice, there's an actual practice that's, I know students forget what they're doing when they go into the Maitri rooms. And I think uh, when they remember to actually use space as their reference point, so they notice what's happening in their mind in a particular posture. And then when they notice they're very distracted, it's the practice is to come back to the space itself. And I really experience students as they do that practice more and more of coming back to the space when they're distracted, that there's more chance to beam into the wisdom aspects of the energy and not just get caught up in the habitual patterns
Yes,
that
that's right.
also are very apparent.
Yeah, well, what would you say is space? Because I think there's this whole trajectory
Mm.
in learning what it is, even,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know, what
yeah,
it is,
yeah.
because it must be felt and experienced in the body, right? And
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I know when I was in my 20s and encountered Maitri in the beginning, I didn't have an ounce of space. So, you know, of course, the neurosis stood out. But I watched this with many students over the years as they do Maitri. It's hard to make that correlation from lying in those postures,
Yeah, yeah,
which is hard to remember what you're doing, and then
right,
how to apply the antidote of space when one is
right.
cooked up, right?
Yeah, 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 right, right. I mean, I think space is the awareness of the dissolution of boundary,
Yeah.
of self as a separate identity, and and as more and more we start to see that life is much more fluid than we might uh, experience it. You know, I think that then and yeah, then maybe we can tune into more how we are part of a whole. We're not just an individual person in an environment, but there's an interdependent web that's occurring.
Right. I love the way Sabina Selassie, who's one of
Mhm.
the teachers we use right now in Karuna,
Mhm.
uh, and she wrote a book called You Belong, and it's
Mm.
such a powerful way of looking at another conversation around when we are agitated or reactive in circumstances or get tweaked in some way, we're separating always, right? And that's what ego's role is, to separate
Mhm.
ourselves and make sure that we are separate from and exist, right? We're reifying our existence. And
Right.
that's the source of suffering from the Buddhist perspective. But this notion of connecting and coming back to this belonging, I love this language because I think, of course, we belong to the trees and the greenery and so forth, but
Mhm.
we don't, we're not conditioned to think like that. And I think Maitri, when it's practiced in a ritual sense, can really bind us to the elemental
Mhm.
inseparability of our nature.
Mhm.
That's how I think.
Right.
Yeah.
And with the elemental nature is also the energy body. So we have the space body, if you will, and the energy body, which is this sacred winds inside us and channels of light and chakras. And so we have these pathways that are clear and fluid, and that's where the movement occurs. But then we also have where these chakras and um, sacred winds get blocked, or there's negativity or conflicting emotions, disturbing images that might come up. And this shows itself as well in terms of habitual patterns that confine us. And yeah, yeah,
It's so
perfect.
interesting, you know, that we know that because we're tantric practitioners and we
Mhm,
learned about channels and all of that through our tantric training. I know that that's true
mhm,
about you and that's true about me. But when
mhm,
Trump Rinpoche released us originally in Elizabethtown, New York, with
mhm,
this Maitri space awareness, he was really not giving that much instruction other than working with the energy and the feeling of space, of denseness, and the Buddha family's
mhm.
relationship to space. And that didn't go so well, you know, in Wingdale, New York. And so Maitri has like had its own evolution. You and I have been watching this for many years.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, right. So first there was Elizabethtown, New York, where Rinpoche had students lying down, and they would put their hands over the body,
Right.
not touching the body at all, but really feeling where the compression of space was happening, not heat of the body, but actual compression of space. And then they worked with sort of the habitual patterns of passion, aggression, and ignoring that arose out of that discovery and exploration. And then in Wingdale, right, that didn't go so well because the community invited people who, Rinpoche said, just invite people who are a little bit more extreme than you. And what happened is was kind of an explosion of energy because the people who were supposedly holding the container were not trained.
Right.
And so then Trungpa Rinpoche asked Marvin Casper if he would design a master's program for students using Maitri space awareness and meditation practice as the ground of the training program. And this is where the counseling program, master's in counseling program, comes.
Right. And so, you stayed in a sense and went towards Wind Horse, which is another healing modality with Maitri space awareness in its own right.
Mm-hmm.
I've taken the Maitri space awareness into a more global,
Right.
opening exploration for people. But what would you say? So we both have this long-term, very long-term relationship with learning how to teach it and hold it and bring it. Somebody on the call, Quentin, said to everyone, postures are awakening to us. Color is awakening to the postures. We're awakening to the palace of the warrior, which I like very much, because I think there's a certain amount of bravery when things open, and we are inviting groundlessness when we do those postures. They're very high Dzogchen postures,
Yeah.
thought
Yeah.
through, So
Right.
where would you say Maitri space awareness is now, particularly at Naropa, and certainly your recent explorations in trying to apply this to social justice and some of the most important topics of the day?
Mm-hmm.
Talk about that for a minute, and then pretty soon we'll open it up to other folks.
Yeah. I think where the Naropa program is using Maitri space awareness is um, looking at transmutation of energies or situations and um, how healing moments can come in that transmutation. So moving from psychological space that might feel crowded or contracted or even fractured into moments of healing or moments of recognition that there's also awareness occurring. Um,
So
but
much more emphasis on the awareness and transmutation and
right,
healing aspect than the neurosis, is what you're saying.
right, yes. And I have to say that in terms of social justice and Maitri space awareness from where Naropa is right now, my experience is that it's quite messy.
Yeah.
And and
Yeah.
there's a lot that needs to be understood and deepened around bringing those two together more skillfully, because I think it's so easy to create harm with the intention of trying to aerate situations and not doing it well, not doing it skillfully. So I think this is where Naropa is right now.
Well, it's interesting because we know that Buddhist Sanghas across the world, or the West anyway, certainly in America and through Shambhala and Trungpa Rinpoche's world, has been very a whitewashed, you could say, and very inflicted with, you could say, I don't know, certain pedagogies that would not be inclusive. I've heard
Mm-hmm.
that from many students. And so I just wonder, because of course, what's interesting about this is that the Maitri work itself, or at least the mandala itself, is an indigenous tool from Tibet, from pre-Tibetan Buddhist times,
yeah,
right? From the
Buddhist,
Buddhist
yeah,
tradition. So
right.
I feel that we're drawing on the indigenous energies as well there. So that's so interesting, you know, that he gifted us this. And I almost feel like it's a koan or a life exploration of, or it's going to take maybe many generations to unlock what we're really doing with this practice.
Right. And I think being careful of not appropriating, the practice too, because there's a way, I mean, Trungpa Rinpoche wanted us to take these teachings on and to teach them and learn them and teach them and continue on. But I think where the appropriation comes in is when the ego wants to grasp it and claim it for its own and say, you
Mm.
know, this is what we've been taught and this is how it goes, and it becomes a very solid way of
Yeah.
exploring Maitri space awareness. And that's where I feel in my conversations with Eduardo, he's really talking about shape shifting even Maitri space awareness practice, which I think is
Oh, well, say more, can you? What does that mean to you?
yeah. Well, I think just a simple example, meaning looking at how Maitri has been transmitted in the past from teacher to student with Trungpa Rinpoche to his students, and then those students becoming teachers for more other students. Uh, and I feel like where we are in collective change is to have a more collective balance of social power happening, so that we start to see that the wisdom is right there in the collective, in those dark spaces, in the cracks,
Yeah,
in the stone that was rejected that now becomes the cornerstone. um, that the colonial mindset fixations learn how to step back and allow for those who haven't had voice to find a place to step forward and start to see this more interesting dance together,
right.
as the collective starts to shift and move,
Yeah.
and more people are included in mandalas of healing and justice. So
Yeah, the way I've been thinking about that is like to get out of the mold of being the teacher who gives the talk and then we do an experiential and then we learn about that, but to try and create circumstances where we evoke the mandala and then the energy of the mandala is brought forward by the participants and we bring the issues that sit on our heart to the methods of space awareness, right? Or we bring the method of space awareness to what rests on our heart, rather,
mhm,
something like that.
mhm,
I'm thinking about that a lot, like how to
mhm.
transform this way of even teaching about the mandala.
Yeah, because really, if we sometimes just having discussion groups, having people do the Maitri space awareness postures, but then not teaching at all about it and just having discussion groups and people start talking about their experience, and you can see how it's all contained within the teachings themselves without having to even teach.
Articulate it. Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
so that's
Well,
exciting, I think,
that's,
for
I think that's hard for white bodies to let that much chaos go on.
oh, I speaking for myself, I would say yes.
For me, for sure, having, especially having done this for so long. Well, let's open it up to other people. I want to, I'll make a gallery view. You do not have to turn on your camera, but you're more than welcome. Some of you have a lot of Maitri experience. I can see that just by your names. And some of you are maybe are new to this. So please bring your questions to the floor and we'll see what's sitting on your heart. Maybe we could, some of you with experience might want to weigh in on this whole healing notion, because one of the points I wanted to make tonight was, I think that it's used as a therapeutic tool for training therapists, Maitri, but really we're not healing in the traditional sense, in the sense like something's wrong and we need to fix ourselves. It's much more about meeting ourselves exactly where we are and restoring the sanity that's already there, right? And the wisdom that's already there. And we're not fixing anything or changing things, but making space for what is there and for discernment and that kind of thing. I mean, that's my experience with it. It's not healing in the sense of this is the medicine you take to get better.
Right. It's really meeting the moment, I feel,
Mhm.
in all of our awakened sense. Yeah.
It's interesting because you just use the language, that's my family. And I know that's how Trungpa Rinpoche taught it.
Mm.
Like he taught that we have specific energetic families that we manifest in. And of course, that's true. We have tendencies and styles of the Buddha families of which we emphasize. But I've always been very leery about that because he was such a tantric meditation master and could see things that I know, having done Maitri my whole life, literally. I really had myself pigeonholed early on in a particular family, and it took me years and years and years of practice to realize, oh my God, you know, what was really going on underneath. And I'm sure I haven't gotten to the bottom of it, so to speak. There's never a Maitri program where I don't discover some new aspect of my ignorance or of my brilliance. You know what I mean? Like it can go in either way, which isn't even mine. It doesn't belong to you, right? When things happen, that's the main point, is that if brilliance arises, there is no you. You're not in this ego fixation state. It's like you're interconnected with everything. So, and we glimpse that, and I think the program gives us that opportunity. But I don't know, do you have anything to say on that, Janneli, about my family? Or I've always been, I always think people try to make an astrology out of the Maitri families. And
Yes. Yeah. Well, in my own experience, my family has changed as
yeah,
over the years. So I thought, oh, this is really my family. And then as I keep integrating and learning new aspects of how I relate to space and energy, then, I have a new family. Or there have been times I feel like I cannot understand this energy. I cannot access it. But through an element, I found the way to access it more.
well,
So there are so many ways to learn, I think, and uh, so yeah, I think there are families that we resonate with more, and then there are families that we want to lean into more. Maybe they're the shadow aspects of us that we don't know as much about. Um, when I remember one time I just did every time I did a Buddha family, then I always went back to the Buddha posture. So I do Padma, then Buddha, then Ratna, then Buddha, then Karuna, then Buddha. And I would just mix all of those with the space of the Buddha family. And then another time I would do Vajra, and then I would do what's across the mandala, which is Padma, or I do Ratna and Karma. And
ah,
start playing with kind of those things, looking at shadow aspects of each other, or seeing how they're similar and different from each other.
oh,
Um, yeah, and then there's the bloat and pop method where you just do, 10 weeks of Padma or whatever. That really bloats you well. And hopefully, yeah, eventually you do pop. I mean, you can't, at some point, you can't
I've never
resist.
found Maitri space awareness to be helpful alone. It sounds like you did a lot of practice alone, because I need to be in a group to bounce off people to be able to get the information. Otherwise, I'm just in some kind of permanent ignorant state.
Well, I would do it alone and then I would go out into the world. I would live my life. So I would do the posture at home and then
Yeah,
I would go out, and so that's how I did it. So the world became my cohort instead of a cohort
that's great.
model. Yeah.
It does feel painful in those moments. An example, just a very simple example that came up in a recent program where someone was intensifying the Padma family, the red energy, the fire energy that has to do with our relationships and how we really, whether we're accepted or rejected or liked or not liked, and popular or not popular and all of that. And this one particular person had been doing Padma for 5 days in this group, in their cohort. And they were the only man in the group. And one of the participants got up to lead a exercise because it was in the graduate program, and we have our graduates lead certain things. And so they were leading a body awareness, and then they made a real inference to everyone being female. And the man just, this man in particular, just felt so bad, so left out, and wanted to pack their bags and wanted to leave the program immediately because they felt suddenly that they had been called out as a man and they were not welcome in the space. And I had to sit with the person for some period to get them to realize that they were intensifying Padma, and it's all about belonging, right? It's so hard to make that connection sometimes. And that's that painful part, to let go of and open to the space that it might not be what we think in our interpretation of reality. That's so hard to do, right? We might not be right. When we feel we're caught or in a reactive state, and it's something that helps, something that really changed the way in Karuna when we started working with Maitri, teaching people how to be with their energy as it arises. So I think I'd like to guide that with everyone for a moment. And so we just simply start in where we are, how we are in this moment. Right now, I feel a little flustered and frustrated because I can't get the technology to work. So I experienced that the first step of this is that I give myself space to experience where I'm feeling that in my body, and I'm feeling it as a kind of heart flutter and a kind of nervousness. I'm not going to put more interpretation on it. It's just a sensation. So you start by identifying any sensations you can find in your body, and you choose the loudest one and stay with it. And then you hold that sensation with curiosity and kindness. We just offer ourselves the space and kindness to move closer to ourselves as we are, whatever we're feeling. That's the second step, is holding ourselves without judgment, which is a practice. So take a few breaths to feel that. And then the energy changes if we really give attention and space to energy in our bodies. It starts to move. So we allow that to move. We allow it to move in our bodies and into our hearts, closer to ourselves, to wake us, to shake us, to open us. Just let the feeling of the energy permeate us, whatever it is. It might be sadness. It might be whatever it is. Allow it to inform the heart. That's the third step. And then the fourth step is we bring ourselves present in the room. So just in this space we're in, we're not pushing the energy away, and we're not focusing on it anymore, but allowing the energy to dissipate into space and letting it be. And this is one way that we can use space and kindness in working with difficult emotions just on the spot. I wanted to let people know that there is a public talk. Do you want to write it in the chat, Janneli, from Eduardo Duran, happening at Naropa? And it is on May 30th to June 3rd. But he's doing a public talk first on May 30th, right? Okay. So, and she says, Eduardo's the author of books Healing the Soul Wound, Buddha and Red Face, and Decolonizing Research in Psychology. And he's been a major influence for me in Karuna, and definitely Janneli's been working closely with him. So that's happening at Naropa in person on May 30th at 7 p.m. And then in Karuna, we're starting a new basic cohort. It begins September 28th. in Tehachapi, California. We're back in California at a place called Ari Bode. And we have a new model where we have 3 living retreats over the course of 2.5 years, or 21 months actually. And then in between, we have online programming and continuity groups. So it's kind of yet another new model to arise to the time. I'll also be in Los Angeles on June 15th and 16th in person, and I'll be in San Diego June 8th and 9th for an introduction. And there we will be trying a real decolonized model of evoking the mandala and moving through the energies. So you'll be introduced to Maitri space awareness. If you can find out about any of those, please go to karunatraining.com and you can register for those programs. So thank you all. Take care. Thank you, Janneli. Bye-bye.